right, everybody. Welcome to another exciting, amazing episode of the Strange Oddities Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew J. Haas. And of course, we have another exciting, amazing guest for tonight. I feel like a kid in a cookie jar. I've always missed my calling when I was really young. And for those who personally know me, I've had a love for archaeology. I loved watching Indiana Jones as a little kid growing up. We all loved, Indiana running up to the little, golden thing on the sand booby trap kind of thing when he picked that piece of gold off of the pedestal, and all the booby traps started to happen. It was great. I loved Indiana Jones. So we have a great guest tonight, guys. Just before we welcome him with warm open arms, as always, guys, we are live on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's a little bell at the top right corner of the screen. You can't miss it. If you do, no worries, but it's up there. Just click it. You're subscribed. There's a little chat room. It's not much. There's a comment section. You can ask the host a question. If you guys have any questions about the topic tonight, I'll try to relate them as we go along in our conversation. Guys, we have a website, strangeodditiespodcast.wordpress.com. That's our website. You can also email me on the quality of the show. If you enjoyed it, give us some feedback. strangeodditiespodcast@gmail.com. Guys, without further ado, I would like to, welcome our big, exciting guest tonight. We have Mr. Archaeologist, Mr. Garth Baldwin. He's been on History Channel. He's made an appearance on the show Buried. It was called The Knights Templar and the Holy Grail. It was on a couple of years ago. I watched it recently, and I really enjoyed the show. I thought it was an interesting take, the investigation, and a scientific look into what happened to the Knights Templar during their time. There was a lot of mystery and a lot of questions of what happened to them. Where did they go? What was their purpose? What did they do? Where did they disappear to? There's a lot of unanswered questions as to what happened to the Knights Templar. So there's a lot of speculation that there are connections possibly with the Freemasons and so forth and other mysterious organizations. But, there's a lot of descendants from all that and stuff. But we're going to get into all that a little bit. But I'd like to, introduce my guest, Mr. Garth Baldwin. Garth, welcome to the Strange Oddities Podcast. Thanks for scheduling for tonight's show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. It's not a problem. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, great.
It's my first podcast, man. I've never done a podcast before.
Yes, and this is exciting that it's his first podcast. So I hope I do him a solid favor by being a gracious host and a good host. We're going to have a lot of fun, guys. It's going to be an exciting topic. We're going to get into archaeology, a little bit of background about Mr. Baldwin himself. How about we do that right now? Maybe tell our viewers a little bit about yourself. How'd you get started? What's your expertise? Is it archaeology? Is it other things? What got you into it?
No, I mean, I don't just play one on TV.
Right.
I am actually an archaeologist. I've been doing archaeology since 1999, so I'm about 20 years into this. Before that, I was in construction, working myself through college. Before that, I was a U.S. Marine. So there's that. Before that, I was in high school because I was a Marine at 17. So that's pretty much where things start.
And by the way, thank you for your service as a U.S. Marine.
Well, I appreciate it. I think I appreciate it. It's one of those things like duty. I've always had a strong inclination to serve my community. I'm a city councilman in the town I grew up in. I've been on the Parks and Cemetery. I was on the Parks and Cemetery board for 4 years. Just one of those things. I always feel like service to your community. But I've always said, like, after this one term as a city councilman, I have done everything I need to do for my community, and I can be selfish and not do anything in somebody else's turn. So I joined the Marine Corps. I did the city council. Right. I'm good.
Yeah.
I studied archaeology at a little college in Bellingham, Washington called Western Washington University. I was lucky enough to get hooked up with a guy there who became my mentor, and he was working at a site in Russia and a cave site in Vladikavkaz, Russia, in Ossetia.
Nice.
A place called Weasel Cave. And so as an undergraduate, I went over there and worked with him. And then as a graduate student, I went over there and did my graduate work. So my education is in Paleolithic archaeology. So Neanderthals, Mousterian stuff. But I've always practiced Northwest Coast archaeology for the most part. So Native American Northwest Coast, the Salish Sea, shell matrix or shell midden sites, stone tools, bone tools. I've been unlucky enough. I don't know how to say it, but I've had the rare pleasure of having to recover many human burials.
Cool.
Some of the biggest burial sites in Washington. Actually, I was the director of a huge cemetery excavation in Port Angeles, Washington, right after I got my master's degree in like 2002-ish. 2003. But yeah, I frequently have that sort of dubious honor. I guess that's the way to put it. I run a small consulting business. I've got anywhere between 4 and 10 employees at any time. We do what's called cultural resource management. So like if Safeway wants to build a store on a big plot of land, and they need to get an Army Corps of Engineers permit, the Army Corps is going to make them do a biological examination, an archaeological examination, a traffic study, all these. It's really very, very not running through, a tunnel with like darts coming out, a big ball behind you.
Sure. Yeah.
It's
so that's
really
Hollywood.
boring.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I have had my, I gotta say, I have had my experiences. I had to rappel down rock cliffs on the Columbia River to get to a place down below, put my screen on my back and a shovel and like rappel down this rock face to get down to this river. We were running in a tunnel, to be honest, running in a tunnel because the train was coming and we're like not supposed to be there. So we were like hauling ass, trying to get the tunnel.
Did you at least have somewhere to like where you can like jump off just in case?
No, it was a pretty small tunnel. We had to get out the other side.
Oh shoot.
We did though. It was all good.
Yeah.
But I've done like you get to some places by rafting, and there's a bit of there's an element of adventure in my job.
Sure.
I was lucky enough to land a gig on the buried program. That was a hell of an adventure. I mean, I was in how many countries in 12 weeks? I was in Israel, and I was on Cyprus, and we went back to Israel, and then we went to France, and we went to England, and we went to Spain and Portugal. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing some of the things we got to do.
Sure.
I mean, as a general education of an archaeologist, I mean, history is a large part of that. I am by no means an expert in Templar or Dark Ages or any of that stuff. I mean, that's not my forte.
Right.
My forte is archaeology and the methodologies of it, and and I got a pretty good bullshit indicator. So like, I'm listening to experts. We were introduced to there were some great real, like in that program. I haven't actually watched the whole program because I can't stand to see myself on TV. It's awful. But like, some of the people that we talked to, the guy that we talked to and his name escapes me, in Israel at Latrun, at that hill fort in Latrun. That guy's a major in the Israeli Defense Forces. He's a special forces guy, but he's also a legit PhD professor of archaeology. His dad was at like Stanford or some. I mean, it's like, these are really, really competent people. The people we talk to are legit. It's not. I've been on other shows. I was on UFO Hunters 5 times.
Nice. There you go.
To be an archaeologist, and they never asked me to, because I'm not a big UFO. If I see an alien or somebody, although the U.S. Navy actually, that stuff off California, the alien thing, whether there's aliens or not, that one really kind of weirds me out. That's putting a little scientific questioning on the whole thing. But up until then, I've been pretty stout in that, I'll see it when I believe it. I am a scientist. But like, it's like I was on UFO Hunters, and the deal was when I got hired to do the jobs was I will find your archaeology. I will tell you what this human stuff is, but I don't make me sound like I know what, like I there's aliens, because I'm not there. It's not my gig. Because they were always really cool. Those are cool people. The UFO Hunter, I'm sorry that show didn't make it more than a couple seasons, because those guys were all really good. You know what I mean? They were legit. Yeah. Yeah, they were nice people.
Right. For those who like really want to learn archaeology, or like, the field that you really are more of expertise in, what kind of background would you suggest them to start in, as far as like colleges and universities, or going out in the field? Because there's a lot of people I know that have a really general interest in going out in the field and going to school for that. Like for me, I missed my calling many years ago. I kicked myself in the ass I don't know how many times that I should have done it.
You're like dead, right? Because you're dead, right? Yeah. No. When I was going to school, and I was in field school in 1999, I was 28 years old, but there was a woman in my class that was in field school, who had retired from the Air Force. And she was an ophthalmology tech. She built glasses.
Sure.
That was her job. She always had a dream to go and to be an archaeologist. And she did it. Susan Fisher. She did it. And there's another woman. I can't remember her name. Started with an L. Just lovely woman. She was to me. I mean, I was 29. I think she was in her 40s. Mm-hmm. Archaeology is one of those things that if you have an aptitude for it, you are never too old to get into it. It's largely cerebral. It's largely common sense. I'm going to tell you that right now. I know a lot of people that have PhDs and advanced degrees that have no common sense, that can't look at a landform and say, well, that's where I'd set my tent up, or that's where I'd build my house.
Right.
And that's where I'd get my fish or my clams, or I'd hunt my deer. And it's just obvious to some people. To some people, it isn't. And there's, community colleges, there's outreaches. Me, as an archaeologist and as a consultant, mm-hmm. I have people that get a hold of me all the time that are like, hey, would it be okay to come out? Or clients, can we come out when you do your survey of our property, where we want to build a house? Mm-hmm. Like, shit, come on out. They bring boots. Get some rain gear, because it's gonna rain. Yeah. You can hold a screen. I'll throw dirt in it. We'll look at it. And before you dump it, we'll take a look at it. Absolutely, right. It's a real hands-on kind of thing. Archaeology is one of those. It's a blue collar. It really is a blue collar science.
Yeah.
And the scientists, our chemists and stuff, they like to call us soft science. Yeah, we're the soft science. We're the ones digging holes with a shovel.
As far from being soft, let me tell you.
Right. Your definition of soft is in question.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
No. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities, and the thing is like, and I guess it harkens to the fact that it is a common sense sort of industry. Guy that works for me, Mike Sean, is exemplar. He's respected all over the Northwest. He doesn't have a college degree. Oh my goodness. I think he's 50 something. He's a little older, maybe a couple years older than I am. Mm-hmm. I have no question about his abilities, his intelligence, his map making is magnificent. His note taking is perfect. It's one of those things that if you're good at it, it doesn't, and to that, it doesn't matter what college you go to.
Sure.
You don't have to go to Stanford. I have a guy on my staff that went to Yale, mm-hmm. and he's an excellent archaeologist. Don't get me wrong. He's an excellent archaeologist. But Sean is as good as the other guy, right. And didn't go to college at all. Sure. I mean, did go to college, but not for archaeology. He went for marketing or something.
Right. We Garth and I were talking a little bit before we started the podcast, and I was, kind of saying to him that when it comes to the archaeology field and all the different, aspects of it, you as a student, you have to get your hands dirty. You have to go out there with the shovel, and you kind of have to. That's where you get your tools and your knowledge, and that's where you're actually learning it. Because there's only so much they can teach you in the university. That you have to go out in the field and do the work in the field, and that's how you pick up your skill. Or if if you have it, then that's where you get it from.
Sure. No, it's 100%, man.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it is. I mean, a lot of people, you can lead a horse to water. You can book smart. I mean, I met a lot of guys that are book smart, really smart people. They can't go out into the field and apply what they've learned.
Right.
They would be fantastic teachers, that they would be on that end of things, but they can't put the dirt work to the book work and make it one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that like I'm a genius in any way, shape, or form. Trust me.
Right.
I'm not a theorist. I can't do some of that stuff they do. I know where stuff is. Like, I know where stuff is, and I know why people are there, and I can figure out what they're doing there and why.
Yeah.
I can figure out the anthropology of the archaeology.
Right.
I'm not real good at talking either.
Sure.
So there's that,
Yeah. So I'm sure you run into this a little bit in your expertise of anthropology then, about maybe people who have ideas about Bigfoot, and maybe they bring some of those theories to you, because then you can kind of bring maybe what and your tools and your knowledge to, all right, if you have certain evidence of what you think is a so-called Bigfoot, that's where you would come in, because then you can kind of assess all right, well, if there were any tools discovered, or a nest, or some kind of living environment that they were in, or or if you steer me if I'm steering you in the wrong direction with this, but
No, I'm in Northwest Washington State, man.
Right.
Okay.
That's Bigfoot country.
There's a guy who was up here, one of the major theorists on the whole Bigfoot thing.
Right.
Is from around here, and I can't remember, is it Crenshaw?
Okay, yeah.
Right? Crenshaw.
Yeah, you got that right.
I think I've actually seen him. I don't know if he's, I don't want to say that, knock on wood. I don't know if he's still alive. He was fairly old. I mean, he's older than I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen guys present stuff at Northwest anthropological conferences. There's a meeting in Northwest, Oregon, Idaho, Washington primarily, but there's conferences all over the state, all over the United States. They're localized anthropological conferences, and anyone can join them. Anyone can go to them. You're encouraged. There's museums that take volunteers. There's archaeologists like myself who would love to have volunteers who want to work. I've had people come in when I'm doing data recovery excavations, the cool stuff, square holes with spoons and brushes. And they would love to have volunteers come in who want to learn. I mean, oh my God, seriously, it's free labor for one thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's outreach. The only reason that my job is important is because people care.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, if nobody cares, I don't have a job.
Right.
And that's the thing. So Bigfoot. Okay, so let's talk about Bigfoot. I have my own theories on Bigfoot. I got friends that swear to God. My father-in-law swears to God he had an incident. I don't know, man. I'm a scientist. I need to see evidence, hardcore evidence, and I don't know that the hide and seek king. The hide and seek crown necessarily goes to Sasquatch.
Sure.
Just yet. Just yet.
Yeah.
But then again, as an archaeologist, I know that there were a whole host of primates that are nothing like we've ever seen before, 10 feet tall.
Right.
In China, there was a giant primate. There's ample evidence of small, little tiny hobbits, right, from Australia, and big giant ones from China. And there's no reason at all to believe that those species didn't make it over here like everybody else prior to modern humans coming out of Africa. They could have been around long before the rest of us decided to look in the mirror and see, us.
Yeah,
it is. And there's the thing about, the thing that is really weird about that is the overarching commonality of the myth. in every, almost, I don't know about every, you can't really just say that blanket term, but like
Sure.
in many societies,
Mm-hmm.
there is a big hairy man. You know, Northwest Coast Indians have a big hairy guy. It translates loosely, you know, it's a big hairy guy.
Right.
But like everybody has one.
Yeah, no, you're right. If you guys are joining us late, I just want to tell our viewers a little bit of what we're talking about. I'm really excited to have Mr. Garth Baldwin on as our guest tonight. This is actually, guys, believe it or not, this is Mr. Baldwin's first podcast. So I'm trying to make this as fun and exciting for him, not only for him, but for you guys as well. So we're talking a little bit about archaeology. We're bringing in many different theories and things of where we can bring archaeology, into, so to speak. We have a couple of questions in the chat room. I guess we can try to... Yeah, if we can try to answer them as best we can would be great. We have two questions, actually. We'll start with the first one. I guess in archaeology or in anthropology, what happens if you find a body in the field?
How fresh is it?
I'm not sure. He wasn't specific.
Technically, in Washington State, it's different. I mean, I imagine it's different in other states. Legally, in Washington State, if I find something that I suspect, or at this point in my life, if I find a human bone, I am by law required to call the local authorities.
Sure.
If it's police, sheriff, whatever it is, you call the cops. They have to turn it over to the medical examiner or whoever that authority is in your particular location. But I also call the state physical anthropologist in Washington State. In Washington State, it's in Olympia. So I'll call Guy, that's his name, Dr. Tassa.
Mm-hmm.
I'll call him, and I'll call the local tribe. Wherever I am, I will call the local tribal representatives to say, hey, they're going to go through the whole formal notification process. I have a piece of human remains here, and I've called the authorities to come check it out. And most of the time you'll get a cop that comes out, and they'll be like, what is it? And I'll say, well, it's a humerus. It's
Mm-hmm.
a right humerus. And they'll be like, okay. Like, dude, you're supposed to take it to the medical examiner or report it by law. Okay. Because they don't know either. Like, so what?
Sure.
It's a bone.
Right.
It's not like a dead, person that was murdered or something. If that, in that case, I have nothing. I don't know nothing about. I'll call the cops and I'll walk away.
Right.
I find, and it's not so. People would be surprised how often I'm walking by something. I was walking down a path to a beach one time and found a human patella just sitting by the path. And it had been sitting there so long that it was bleached white. I can tell you, I have found bleached white human elements.
Yikes.
Skeletal elements sitting on the surface numerous times in my life.
Oh,
it's
man.
Just,
that's crazy.
Yeah, you may have actually walked past one or two in your life.
I'm probably sure I did in my area.
Yeah, you don't want to go screwing around with unidentified bones.
No.
Like if you see some bone, a lot of people, like, people that they doubt themselves.
Sure.
Okay. If you saw a femur, I'm pretty sure you would know what a femur looked like. I mean, we've all seen enough movies, and a skull. I mean, there's things, teeth, jawbone, mandibles, things like that. Fingers, bones, though, those get weird. Like bears, humans and bears, those are tricky. Your regular long bones, your tibia and your lower legs, your upper arms, your humerus, that sort of thing will get mixed up, and nobody's gonna know. Nobody knows what a talus is in a foot. But we had a guy one time come to me with a Ziploc baggie, and in it was the majority of a human foot, because there was a big talus and there was a bunch of peds in there. And I was on Tarawa in the South Pacific doing human remains recovery of MIA, KIA Marines and and sailors from World War II. That's where one of the big Highland hopping campaign things I was working. I was lucky enough to work there for a month. And this guy comes up with a bag, and he didn't speak any English. He's Basio. He's Kiribati, was the people there, Kiribati. He comes up with this bag. For you. I'm like, great, thanks, man. Where'd you find it? Yeah. So I had to send one of the local guys back with him to find out where he came from. Put a mark on the bag. So when we have time, or when someone has time, they can go back and check that location. So.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done MIA recovery too.
Yeah.
So that's some lucky stuff. Like you're saying, adventure stuff. I flew off to the South Pacific and did that.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a great occupation for
Sure.
a young person.
Yeah.
Particularly.
We have one more question in the chat. We have one that says from Kendra, and that first question was from Mr. Floyd Maddox. So thanks for that question, Floyd.
Thanks, Floyd.
Yep, thanks a lot for a nice gruesome part of the conversation.
Squid.
Right? They all come out of the woodworks when it comes to certain subjects of our shows.
No, I know that guy.
Yeah, that's why this is Strange Oddities Podcast. That's what makes it this podcast. All right, so Kendra Crow says, as an archaeologist, do you ever take bones home with you? And if so, is your house haunted, or if you hear voices calling from the static in your TV, or do you go into the light? So I guess basically, have you had any strange experiences with bringing work home in your own home?
In complete honesty, I have had myself, it's ultimately my responsibility. So although some crew or something would have collected something without properly asking me to identify it, or it gets mixed up in something and lost, if you will. And yes, I have brought human remains home to my house, because my office used to be in my house. And I brought them home when I was on a project. I brought home a big bag full of human remains from a project into my hotel room. Oh my. And I'm going to be honest with you. I had the worst nightmares that night.
Oh, I did. Sure. I would.
I had the worst nightmares. It was awful. And then I've had a couple of really weird experiences before. We had a project where we excavated a cemetery, and I lost a bunch of my tools. Right. And I'm the boss, right? Like, I'm the boss, and I have a big bag and it's full of tools, and everybody goes and they steal my tools because, they figure, well, hey, he's the boss. He's got the tools. So they take my tools. It still happens. For 20 years, it's been happening. People just steal my shit. So it was a bunch of dental tools. And that's what I was using, because I was always doing, it was either me or there was a couple guys in the crew that were doing the actual excavation of the burials. We had 268-ish graves in this area, all wow. Native American. There were some of them that were down below the water line in the peat bog water. Organics were in it. Mm-hmm. And all the bone was gone. All that was left was the dentum from their teeth. You could actually pick it up off the shadow. It looked like Hiroshima. It was a shadow of a person in a flexed position, when they're flexed like that. Super crazy. Yeah. But I was pissed about these tools, and had been working on this one burial, and I had to stop working on it, help somebody else out, and somebody had taken my shit. And I was, I got back to it, and when I finished, I swear to God, when I finished that burial, it was a female, and some kind of grader or something had gone over the surface of the sand. It was all sand, and they cut the head of this person in half, so it was just like an open skull. When I finally got her skull out of the ground, there was a copper earring, a little piece of hammered copper. There's native copper around here that the Indians used to hammer out. It was it's a wealth symbol, right? But it was a little piece of copper, had a hole in it. Presumably it was an earring, because I found it right there pressed against her cheek. And between her mandible, between the bone and that copper, was a piece of hair. Wow. Swear to God. I swear that copper preserved that hair. And so I got her out of there, and I finally got her all into that box. We had boxes. And I was working with a tribe, and the tribe had provide boxes for every one of the people we took out, put them in the box. And I took her and we put her in the box. Box goes away. I turn over and look at my bag, and it's really sunny on the beach in Port Angeles. My fucking dental tools were back in my bag. Swear to God. Wow. You can ask anybody that was there. They weren't there. It was in an outside pocket, and they were all, at least somebody was screwing with me. If somebody wasn't, and that's what I was asking. I was like, okay, so who did that? They're like, dude, freaked them out. And especially the tribal kids that were working for me, freaked them out. So that's like the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me as far as, I don't know. Yeah.
That would be one for the record books.
And not much for Sasquatch, but spiritually, I've seen some things.
Sure. It kind of reminds me of the interview I did with Dr. Zahi Hawass, widely globally recognized archaeologist. For those who are unfamiliar with him,
the director of Egyptian antiquities.
Yes, there you go. Funny story is, one of the questions I had asked him was similar to the question that we had from the chat from Kendra, and I had asked him very direct. I was just like, I have to know. I was like, are the pyramids haunted? Like, there has to be some kind of spiritual thing going on inside the pyramid. So I finally have the opportunity to ask him, is it haunted? And his first response, and his response was priceless. He was like, no. I just thought that was funny.
He's a hard ass.
Yeah,
he really is.
Yeah,
like that guy is something else. He's something else.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you guys gotta watch. Google him on YouTube. Well, look him up on YouTube. There's a documentary where he was taking students, that were interns around like a tour, and the video is hilarious because there was a young girl that, after being like a couple miles into the pyramid on the tour, she had to go to the bathroom, and Dr. Zahi was like just getting done explaining to them that there's been no moisture in these pyramids for like thousands of years. There's been, no water here. We're in the desert. And she like didn't take the opportunity to go to the bathroom before going into the pyramid, and she couldn't hold it in, and she actually had to end up going in her shorts or her pants or whatever. And he got so upset. And this is before I scheduled him to be a guest on a past podcast of mine, and I was looking at my my co-host at the time, like, what are we getting ourselves into? Because I don't know what to expect now, like when I interview him on our show, and I'm like, I don't know, like, it freaked me out because I'm like, oh man, what do we get ourselves into?
He's excitable.
Yeah.
And he'll tell you his opinion. Like,
yeah.
Without hesitation, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, so we have a couple more people in the chat room. Guys, I want to really thank you. Just take the time, shout outs to the people who are tuning in tonight. Thanks for tuning in to listening to our guest who took the gracious time and being our guest on Strange Oddities Podcast. We're talking to Mr. Garth Baldwin. We have Kendra Crow in the chat room. We have Mr. Floyd Maddox. My wife is helping moderate the chat there, so I always want to thank my wife for doing a great job. We have Amanda Baldwin. I don't know if she's any relation.
That's my daughter.
Oh, okay. She's got a question here. What made you decide you wanted to be an archaeologist? Was this what you always thought you'd be doing? Aw.
No.
No?
Actually, when I was little, I wanted to be a Marine. That's it. That's all I wanted to do. But James Mattis and Bill Clinton had different ideas. So when they downsized the Marine Corps in 1992, I was an NCO that was not necessary. So I had to go home and figure out what I was going to do. So I went to school to study English because I always wanted to be a writer too. I was a big Tolkien fan when I was little and when I was young, and I read all those books, and I used to read a lot. I mean, I still read, but I used to read a lot. And I want to be a writer. I could be a writer, I thought. And I wrote poetry, believe it or not. It sucked, cool. But like I wrote it. And then I realized after I was a junior in college that, I'm not very good at this. I'm not a good poet, not a really good writer, and I don't want to teach other people's children. Like, that's what you have to do. You have to be an English teacher at school or something. And that was kind of passed through me for a minute. I was like, well, I could teach English at school and coach baseball or something. That'd be great. And then I thought, you know what? I just don't like other people's children that much. And I don't want to do it year after year after year after year. Every year, do the same curriculum, the same thing every year for the rest of my life. And I fell into a class with Dr. Todd Cucci at Western Washington University. And I just fell into the class. I mean, I took it because I didn't have to take another one of those, you're a horrible male American person, you need to take this humanities credit to, justify your existence. Because that's a horrible thing to say. But like, it's liberal arts sort of college, and so I mean I've taken tons of those classes, and I just wanted to take something fun.
Yeah.
And so I took Intro to Archaeology. I wrote a paper that Todd was like, "Wow, man, this is great insights. What's your major?" I said English. And he goes, "Why?" It's like, I don't know. I thought I could do this, and he's like, "Well, you could do archaeology too.
Mm-hmm.
You have good insights, and it really is a common sense profession." And I said, "Can you make a living doing that?" I've been doing it at the time. He's like, "I've been doing that for 20 years, and that was 20 years ago."
Nice.
And he's still doing it. He's the department chair at Western Washington University.
There you go.
So an excellent archaeologist. He's an outstanding professor. He's one of those guys, though. He's one of those professors, throw you off the boat, swim.
We have more questions in the chat. We'll get to them in a couple seconds, Guy. Sure. I have one question for Mr. Baldwin. Who would you consider your most influential people that you would consider like maybe a mentor that really helped guide you to where you are now? Like, who would you say you looked up to the most?
It's funny. Well, I definitely would say, Todd Cucci and Sarah Campbell that are at Western Washington University, and Nazim Hijrati, who's at North Ossetia State in Vladikavkaz, Ossetia. Like, really, there's a lot of people, man. Nobody's life is like on its own. A guy that works for me or used to work for me, he still calls me boss when I call him. He's a friend of mine. We go hunting together. We're friends, but he still calls me boss. I think he does it just to screw with me. And he's like, so he worked for me, and he's like younger than I am, only by a couple of years. But Robert Warbus, he's a Native American guy. He's a Lummi guy, and he's a huge mentor. I mean, he's like a huge influence on my life.
Sure.
Regardless of perceived status, it's about what people contribute to your life. It doesn't matter who they are. I mean, my son, my 4-year-old, my daughter, Amanda, who seems to be watching right now, has taught me tons of things. It makes you different, as you age and stuff, you become a different person. But
sure.
Yeah, it's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Yeah, that's a good question. All right, guys, we have more people asking questions. Just trying to keep up with everybody because the chat room's blowing up, which I'm, really grateful for. Thanks for, throwing your questions in there, guys. All right, we got, what is the coolest thing you have ever found on a dig? That's from Kendra Crow.
Kendra needs to stop asking questions. What was the question again?
What was the coolest thing that you ever have found on a dig?
I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've been lucky enough to dig in some really cool places. Neanderthal caves, and I found a wood carving tool in a Neanderthal cave in the Russian Caucasus. They say the Russians. They say that Mousterians and Neanderthals didn't carve wood. They didn't do woodworking. But I found a woodworking tool in a Neanderthal deposit in a cave. One of the funnest things I ever found, and this is going to sound so like ridiculous to people. I was surveying a beach right here in Blaine where I live, and we were shooting in the beach with a total station, which is a electronic theodolite computerized thing that surveys stuff, gets points and stuff. And I found a cobble. It had a flake taken out of it. It was way down the beach. And I was coming back, and I got near the main part of the site, the archaeological site, the shell midden. It was eroding out. And I found this dirty, it had just eroded out because there was still dirt on it. And it was a flake. And I looked at it, and the stone was the same kind of like buttery yellow color, and it was this funny triangle. It was like it had a humped top, and then it came down like this, right? And I'm looking at it like, no way. I run up, and it's got to be 40 50 yards up to where that cobble was, and I took that thing off, and I cleaned it off, and I stuck it right back into that cobble, and it clicked. It just went click, and I refit it. It was right there. That was the same. It was that flake that had just eroded out down there. It was from that cobble way down over there. It was one of the cool. It's one of the cool. It's so like, what?
Yeah. As
an archaeologist, that is one of the coolest things.
Right. I was gonna say too that it's probably, I don't know how often it would be where you'd find one piece or a whole piece of something, of a tool or an object, where you're digging, but it'll be located in one place and then the other piece like somewhere nearby. Like, so I'm sure like sometimes you find a piece and you're like, damn, I wish I had that other piece. And
Yeah.
I'm sure it's like you kind of become lucky or unlucky. It's like just kind of taking a stab at where it could be.
No, that's the shit.
Yeah.
That's it. People think that it's like pyramids and jade monkeys and all that kind of stuff. No, it's little broken pieces of rock
Yeah.
that like all refit.
Yeah.
Some over here and some over here and some over by that fire pit right there. And then they all go together. That's where the behavior comes in. That's where human behavior happens.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. Definitely. All right. We're 8:42. Got lots of people in the chat room again, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Those who are tuning in late, we're talking with Mr. Garth Baldwin. He appeared on the History Channel's docu-series called Buried. It was called The Knights Templar and the Holy Grail. That's maybe dabble in that a little bit. I know you had like a really good scientific, somewhat archaeologist investigation part of that. What was your experience like with that?
I like we talked about earlier. It was a good experience. In that we had, I mean, not to mention the travel. I mean, come on, the Karga, the company that bankrolled us and shot the film and stuff. I don't think history loved us, so they kind of like they threw our work out there. They broadcast it. They paid for it. They broadcast it. And they pretty much just dumped it into rerun. I think we got shafted.
Yeah, sorry.
But because I've had tons of people who really liked the show and really
I liked it. Yeah.
I see Mikey, my co-host there.
Mm-hmm.
He and I were running the thing. We're doing the archaeology stuff or the investigation stuff. We wanted to be real. We didn't want to be like some of those other programs who are like, well, I guess we'll never know. No, it was like, so what have we got? What can we say? What are you telling us? We were taken to experts who were in large part, we didn't talk to too many, hokey people. We talked to really people who really knew what the hell they were talking about.
Right.
And we want to give them a platform to tell us what was going on, and then we had our own spin on it. We had to, our perspectives and our analysis of it and fitting it into the other things that we were finding out, and like you were asking, like, oh, what happens to the Knights Templar? Nothing happens to the Knights Templar, man. Right. They go to Portugal. They establish Portugal. They're the Order of Christ. I mean, the King of Portugal is, the not precept. It's the head Templar. I mean, he's like, there's no question about it. In Portugal, the Knights Templar are who established the country. I mean, the big red cross on their ships of the Portuguese Navy. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's that's where they were given. They were like, okay, fine. And I think it was probably one of those things that like the Templars like, no, we're going to retreat to Portugal, this little tiny sliver of a country on Spain and France.
Right.
And nobody fucked with them.
Sure.
Because if you don't screw with us, we won't screw with you. I think that might have been part of the deal. Because they were still a force. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's definitely where they went. There was a lot of questions to be asked about at the end of that series that, like, we totally could have gone to the New World, if you will.
Right.
You know what I mean? And there was lots of things that were interesting to talk about. And, Portugal. I don't know if anybody's never been to Portugal. Woo! That's a hell of a place to go.
Europe is like on my bucket list. I still have yet to go over there, and
Portugal.
I'm actually 40% Western European. I'm 27% Irish, and I'm like a smaller percentage of German. I did Ancestry, and so therefore it gives me more willpower to wanting to go over that way someday.
Sure.
Visit my family.
Portugal's
heritage.
a great place to go because the people there are people in Portugal are very welcoming, but they're also very protective of their own and your privacy.
Mm-hmm.
They're very, it's hard to describe. Like, you can get into conversations and just, they're great people, and the wine is fabulous. It's fabulous. And the food is wonderful. And the people are as nice to you as you are to them. And if you want your privacy, they give you your privacy. You know what I mean? It's really an interesting country, interesting, great group of people. But yeah, we did tons of fun over there. I mean, really, I saw amazing things. And when we had the cameras with us, and the production company, and the sound guy, and the director, I'm like underneath the old city of Jerusalem, like literally in the catacombs underneath the, Alaska Mosque and the rock of the dome of the rock. Sorry. And, I mean, these big, huge religious locations is,
Sure. I'm so
and
jealous.
The base of the wall
Yeah.
was, we walked back, along the base of the Wailing Wall.
Mm-hmm.
And the archaeologist that's there is like, well, do you want to, climb over the 2x4 railing into the excavations that we're doing? Really? Like, yeah, sure.
Of course,
There's
that's why
like
we're there.
3,000-year-old deposits, and like, ponds, these things people were doing, these irrigation systems that were like below there. We were 30 meters below the city. And there's like, it's amazing. It was amazing. We got to go into the caverns below the city.
That's awesome.
Where the limestone quarry was.
Yeah.
And then where the people, you get to go there as a tourist, you can go to a certain location. We got to go on the other side of the chain, and then down and down and down. I mean, we got access to a lot of stuff just because we had, TV cameras and stuff.
Sure.
It was great.
Yeah. And they paid for everything. And
yeah, everything was good. Yeah, it was fabulous.
Yeah. But, I would have loved to have picture all that in person, but just to be there in person and see it on TV are two different things. But you missed a lot. Yeah,
there were some parts they left out too.
Right. Yeah, no, that's editing. That you gotta love editing. I mean, they're gonna edit it to whatever their liking is, what they want to put on TV. So. I've been in that position before, like when my wife and I did Paranormal Survivor, there was a lot of things that were cut out and important things that were left out. And I just feel like I wish I could just go back and kind of do it all over again and have more say into it. But again, sometimes you have say and sometimes you don't.
Yeah, I had nothing. I had zero say.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
There was this lady in France, actually where the Templars were from, in the Champagne, and it was Troyes, near Troyes in France, where the actual original Templars are from.
Right.
And her husband had found a cache of silver coins, and we went and visited her. And I think that does make the show, I believe. But a lot of what she had to say, and it was very emotional for her because he had died not that long before we went and saw her. And she was really, really, really opening to us. Let us come in. We had to look at all the coins that he'd found, and she was just a really, really nice lady.
Yeah,
and I just
great.
didn't think that they gave her story and his story. I don't think they really give his story in respect to her enough say in the matter, because he found, one of the original Knights Templar, forts, not forts, but they're like, they're farms. They set up these farms all over the place, and banks and all this kind of stuff. Those guys were nuts, money wise.
Yeah. Well, they had stuff all over the place. They had like sacred churches, and
they owned the island of Cyprus.
Yeah, right.
They sold that a couple times.
Yep. Yeah, they had all these sites, all these sacred sites and stuff. And what's your take? I don't know if you're familiar with the show, The Curse of Oak Island, which is on the History Channel. Been on for a long time, and I kind of appreciate the research and history that they've dug up there, and there's a little bit of information pointing that the Knights Templar, or at least some kind of connection to the Knights Templar, reached Nova Scotia in that area. with their research. What's your thoughts on them coming to the to North America and north of there? I totally, with the evidence that's been discovered, I totally think that they were there long before other people.
So, my opinion, for what it's worth, I mean, I don't know shit, right? But I've never actually seen an episode of Oak Island. I've seen a couple parts of it here and there, and to me, in my opinion, they're another one of those stories, ongoing stories of I guess we'll never know. It's a lot of hooey. It's a lot of buildup without a lot of data, a lot of and I don't think that the Knights Templar ever made it into America because I don't think they were the Knights Templar. I think they'd gotten to Portugal. I think they were they evolved into their next progression. And I think that they were the Portuguese. And I think that they may have actually been there. But I think they focused on, the resource rich Central South American areas, and then south in Africa and stuff like that, and the Dutch, the Dutch Indies and all that kind of crap. And I don't want to get on that. But the Vikings were in Newfoundland way before anybody. There's a lot of people who came and touched base there, so there really is no telling. I mean, for sure, and finding a coin or archaeology is like that. I mean, when we dig an excavation unit. Todd used to do this. We'd dig it when I was in college, and I taught field schools for 2 years after, 3 years technically, but he would have, it was the first year that Jefferson Quarter came out, and he's like the one with the funny side profile picture, and when we'd finish an excavation unit, he'd throw one of those quarters in, and then we'd backfill it. So if another archaeologist ever came in, they got down to that level, it had our date, right?
Right.
So that's our date stamp. So, But anywhere else in the world, if you find something like that and you're somewhere and you dig down and you find whatever it is and it has a complementary date to some other time, you know that could not have happened before that. So, like, screw if I don't know. I mean, if the Oak Island guys are legit, which I seriously doubt, frankly, but what the hell do I know? I've never excavated there. If they did find a coin, like somebody said they found a coin or like 30 meters down or something, how it gets there, I don't know. But if it got there, it had to be there at some point in time. And if there was legitimate geological information or stratigraphic support for its depositional location, which not a fucking one of those guys is a scientist that would know shit all about that. They couldn't prove it. See, that's the shitty thing. Like, even if it was legit, they don't have the scientific methodology to say, no, here's the stratigraphic sequence that we excavated. We know that these are all layers that were set down at these times. Here's the sediment profile. We found this here, and then you could explain why it's found there. That sucks. That's why when people go into archaeological sites and they dig stuff up to find arrowheads or whatever else, they're not looking for the important stuff. What they're doing is they're taking the important stuff and they're throwing it away like it's garbage. The little broken pieces of chips and stones and stuff that are actually the story. That arrowhead doesn't mean shit. It's the pieces that came off of it to make it at wherever that happened. That's the important thing. Or where it was retouched, or where, you know what I mean? I know you know what I mean.
I know where you're coming from. Absolutely, it's the story behind that is telling that the story of the arrow, like what
the garbage, honestly, the trash, is where the true story is. Like those guys in Phoenix, the University of Arizona in Phoenix, were going through people's trash for years. The garbologists, they were sending out questionnaires, asking people how much they drank a week, how many times they had sex a week, how much they did this, and what blah 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 blah. And then they collected all their garbage.
Nice. So
and then they through their garbage.
Right. All right, we're getting to the bottom of the show. I can't believe an hour went by already. Strange Oddities Podcast. We only go around about an hour or so, but the great thing about our show is I'm the producer. I can make it run as long as I want, but I don't want to tire our audience or our guests too long. But we have one really good, interesting question, actually. I think I have to ask this question because it's really a really interesting question to our conversation by Kendra. One last question by Kendra. Who would win a battle with a Knights Templar broadsword or an ancient Aztec with an obsidian axe?
That's easy. The Templar would whack him. Absolutely. No, there's no
hands
question.
Down, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, hands down. Because the obsidian wouldn't make it through the armor.
Yeah.
It's, the stone wouldn't make it through the armor. And if it did, it wouldn't get through enough without being... If it did, it would only do so once. You know what I mean? Whereas the broadsword is just going to keep going, and they didn't have the kind of armor that was supported that sort of onslaught.
Yeah.
There's just no way.
Yeah.
Those guys were brutal, too. I mean, you're talking about the Templars. You're talking about an NFL play. I mean, for competency, not that they were the size of, but, Navy SEALs with swords, those guys were killers.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
They were killers.
Yeah.
And they believed in what they were doing to the extent of zealot. I mean, they were killing for God. And that's all they did. The best thing that could have ever happened to one of those dudes was to be killed in the battlefield for God.
Yeah.
You can't fight that stuff.
No. No, you can't. And how many people do you know that can say that I fought for God with my sword and I killed somebody for God?
That's their thing. That was keeping them going.
Yeah, exactly. So, but listen, guys, we're coming down to the end. If there was any questions we missed, we'll catch them next time. Guys, if you love the show, hate the show, always email us at strangeodditiespodcast@gmail.com. Before we part ways with Mr. Garth Baldwin, Garth, are there any shout-outs to anybody that you'd like to take at this moment to relay to people in this given time, or any upcoming events you like to share, maybe appearances, or I always give this opportunity at the end for you guys to promote yourself.
Oh, I hear you. No, I'm not much of a self-promoter, man. But I thank you for thinking. I appreciate the fact that you thought I was interesting enough that you wanted to have a conversation with me and present it to your viewers. That's flattering. It really is. And I really am. As a matter of fact, if anybody's watching, I don't have a Facebook, but I have an Instagram, and I have a ton of people on Instagram that follow me because of the Buried Show, and they're very nice. And I talk to, they're nice people and they're interesting people. And so to them, because they have it in their lives, they would take the time, like you did, to think I was interesting enough to want to talk to. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, well, I think this has been a great conversation. I hope you had fun. I know I did, and
yeah,
I hope our viewers enjoyed our conversation. Anytime that I can, have someone like Mr. Garth Baldwin on my show, it's a learning experience for me personally, because like I said, I missed my calling years ago. And
no, you didn't.
Well,
not over, Matt.
That's right. I hear it all the time, and yeah, you're right.
Totally do it.
Yeah, I totally hear you. It's never too late for anybody. Like, really,
no.
if there's a love or passion you have, just go for it, man. Life is too short, and don't live with regrets and, kick yourself in the butt later on in life. Just do it, man. So that's good inspiration. Listen to Mr. Baldwin here. So that's really good advice. So, I know, in this time, I'd like to just thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Guys, you can always catch the replay if you missed the live show. Don't worry, it's always there on our YouTube channel. You can always go back to it. I put the link up on our Facebook page. Strange Oddities Podcast does have a Facebook page. You can follow our upcoming guest schedule on our Facebook. I make announcements there. I sometimes just do a live video feed making announcements here and there. But I save all that for the live show. So I do want to take the time real quick. a shout out to Mr. Adam Thorne from the History Channel's new show, Kings of Pain, was our guest last week, and he was an amazing guest to have. He was a lot of fun, so it's just a big shout out to him and thanking him again publicly for being on the Strange Oddities podcast. So I always give, big thank yous to our guests previously. Mr. Baldwin, thank you so much for being on tonight's show. If you don't mind, hang out a little bit, and we'll say our goodbyes after we go off the air. Guys,
Hi.
all right, have a great night. Any last words, Mr. Baldwin, before I cut everybody off the air?
No, they'll hear from me later.
All right. So, guys, have a great night, and be good, be well, be safe. Take care, guys.
Are we off?